This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya, from the Fort Hall School of Government. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at some of the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 12th of October, 2022, and I'm 2M.
I am DK.
And I am AX. In case you've missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, Raila takes on Ruto. In the Standard, Raila Kalonzo new plan to rein in Ruto. In the Star, EACC cast doubt on some Ruto CS picks. And finally, in the People Daily, Ruto allies in push for IEBC purge. But before we get to the headlines, 2M, why don't you kick us off?
Absolutely. Today we submit that William Ruto has adopted a model we call Mongoloid economics. In fact, we want to state that President Ruto's economic advisors, names withheld, have not read enough. And the Mongoloid has to do with savings and consumption. His advisors have told him to focus on national savings. But here at the Fort Hall School of Government, we do not believe that this is how to pull out a country out of an economic slowdown. More so when the globe is facing an imminent recession. The only way out is increasing consumption. Only until when you have adequate consumption is when you can talk of savings. Telling poor people to save is cruel. Allow me to explain. During the Great Depression of 1929, global governments used the classical economic model known as supply-side economics to bring back the economies to life. But they failed. Up until John Keynes came up with a concept known as aggregate demand. He told us in order to fix the Great Depression, we needed to increase demand, not supply. And the agent of increasing demand was cash. Cash from government. The more cash one had, the more they could spend. But before we explain demand further, let us take country to school and define supply-side economics. Supply-side economics means you produce enough maize and the market will buy. And if the market does not have cash, it will use their savings. But this needs a trigger, and the trigger is cash. In a nutshell, in supply-side economics, the market is expected to regulate itself. The market is trusted to get itself out of an economic hole. And this is what Ruto has done. He has cut petrol, diesel, and food subsidies and told us, let the market correct itself. He has cut 300 billion shillings of government spending and told us that the banks will provide the cash. The market will correct itself. And on this, he is right. But asking poor people to save cash they don't have is the Mongoloid part of his economics. What will take us out of the economic crisis is not savings. What we need is spending and consumption. And that spending is catalyzed by an agent called government. And to illustrate my point, let me give you a story. Once upon a time, a traveler went into a small old hotel to check in. He has to go inspect the rooms first. So in good faith, he left a $100 bill, a deposit of sorts, with the hotel owner. The hotel owner immediately ran next door to pay his grocery bill. The grocer in turn ran across the street to pay one of his suppliers. The supplier used the same $100 bill to pay off his Shylock. The Shylock then went across the street to pay his local masseuse who had taken up residence at the hotel. All in good time, the masseuse went downstairs to pay her hotel bill just before the traveler got back to reception. When the traveler got back to reception, he collected his $100 bill off the desk and left saying that the rooms were not satisfactory. What's the point of my story here? The traveler is government. The idea here is if everyone is in a fix, inject cash into the economy and everyone will pay their bill and the government somehow will get back its cash. And slowly everybody gets by. Your Excellency, your economic advisors are failing you. They must remember the world is set up in a trickle-down structure. If China's GDP has been cut by half, Kenya will feel it. If Europe cannot produce because they cannot access Russian gas, we will feel it. If the US Federal Reserve has increased interest rates, Kenya will feel it. Kenya is so interconnected to the global north that any blip out there, we will feel it. Therefore, Bwana Rais, if it ain't broken or if it ain't broken, Don't fix it.
Don't fix it.
Indeed. So on the subject of economics, allow me to continue. Yesterday, Ruto backed the privatization of up to 10 mature parastatals over the next year in a move to raise more funding for the government. Although it is early days, this proposal has raised a number of alarm bells here at the Fort Hall School of Government, because privatization has never benefited the people. It has only benefited politicians. In Russia, this is what they call bureaucratic collectivism.
Yes.
Politicians acting in the name of the people, but benefiting themselves.
Correct.
Now, in the 1990s, the government of Kenya was forced to sell parastatals to private companies. An example of this is the sale of Safaricom. Not only did politicians use their influence to facilitate Vodafone's original investment in Safaricom, they also used their influence to increase how much of Safaricom Vodafone would own, from 30% to 40%. Today, that 10%, that extra 10%, is worth 94 billion shillings. Additionally, these faceless politicians created a company, Mobitela, to buy shares themselves. When these politicians eventually disposed of their 2 billion shares in Safaricom, they had made a staggering 6 billion shillings. They became dynasties. But the people, the hustlers, made nothing. In fact, the hustlers became poorer. Between 1990 and 2001, as the government sold off its parastatals, the number of people living in poverty rose by 6 million, from 11 million in 1990 to 17 million in 2001. So, if history has taught us that privatization of companies only harms hustlers, then why is Ruto pursuing this policy? Does he have a point? In many respects, yes and no. Parastatals cost more money than they are worth. For example, last year the government announced a 36 billion shilling plan to rescue only 5 parastatals. This sum is 7 times more than the amount allocated to cushion farmers in the 2022-2023 budget. Given President Ruto's drive to eliminate wasteful government spending, therefore, privatization makes common sense.
Correct.
However, Ruto's policy of privatization will only create new dynasties, like the sale of Safaricom did. As DK reminded us last week, in George Orwell's Animal Farm or Shamba la Wanyama, the pigs overthrew the dynasty of Mr. Jones. They then declared all animals are equal, and that is why the wheelbarrow was put on the president's flag at the farm. But after a few years, the pigs changed the law and declared that all animals are equal, yes, but some are more equal than others. What is my point here? In the 1990s, politicians had first bite at the sale of parastatals, and they made billions as millions were pushed into poverty. Will history repeat itself? Will the hustler revolution eat its own children, the hustlers? At the Fort Hall School of Government, we are suspicious of this privatization, but we could also be wrong.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to take you guys back a bit.
Okay.
And during the campaigns, Mother Karua called William Ruto Deputy Jesus. And we laughed. Today I want to submit that indeed President Ruto has acted like Jesus himself. Inspired by the book of Elohim, it is written that Jesus did not come for the righteous. He came for the sinners.
Yes.
President Ruto has done exactly that.
Yes.
Remember that Jesus was crucified between 2 thieves. And this fraternity of sinners sandwiching the Savior, who is our president, was deliberate. The significant part was that, Jesus forgave one of the thieves.
Yes.
And this is what will happen to the CS appointees that Ruto has picked.
Yes.
In the Star today, ESCC is casting doubts on some of the picks that the president has for CS positions.
Yes.
And the question is this: can ESCC really stop William Ruto? And here at Fort Hall School of Government, we think yes. Some will be forgiven and others will not be forgiven. They can and they will stop some of these nominees at the ESCC level. But this will happen by design. In our thinking, ESCC is only dog whistling. Some of the names proposed do not make sense, and this was done deliberately. Their nomination was meant to create a perception of Ruto keeping his word,
Yes.
with the intention of not keeping his word. And this is how. Machiavelli taught us that a prince must always seem to be moral, even if he's not.
Yes.
They were announced from State House. Their sins are being cleansed by courts, but then they will use EACC and Parliament to axe them. In short, what I'm saying is that this fixing is happening in 3 phases. In phase 1, it was to get them and their supporters to feel safe. Phase 2 was to accelerate their optimism by removing their pending court cases from their names. This way, Ruto will not be blamed in phase 3, where they will be thrown out and the burden of that choice will be put on the independence of EACC and Parliament.
Very clever.
Without criminal cases, they will then be sent back to bargaining for tenders, but they will not be in government.
Yeah.
Back to being Deputy Jesus. And I have a random thought for hustlers. Dear hustlers, aka Kikuyus,
Yeah.
just like the Messiah did not come for the righteous, Ruto's presidency is not here for you. Those that believed in him before he was elected do not matter anymore. And to this I have a question for you. Since he became president, how many times has he visited Central Kenya? And on the same question, how many times has he been to Luo Nyanza? Our opinion is that the sinners in his political kingdom are Luyas and Luos, and he will be seducing them for the next 5 years and not you hustlers. After all, those 2 regions combined will give him more than 2.5 million votes that Kikuyus gave him in 2022. And in case one of you is stopped from becoming cabinet secretary, they will be replaced by a Luo or a Luya.
Okay. Wow. So let us return to the headlines. Now, as you know, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to judge our headlines. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Is the headline topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, thoughtful, or just plain lazy? Now, let me remind you what the headlines are. In the Daily Nation, Raila takes on Ruto. In the Standard, Raila Kalonzo new plan to rein in Ruto. In the Star, EACC cast doubt on some Ruto CS picks. And finally, the People Daily, Ruto allies in push for IEBC purge.
They're all too descriptive. I think
All
we
too
all
descriptive?
throw a whole lot of them out.
Hold up.
Yep.
DK, you in agreement?
Yeah, I do.
All right. Goodbye. All right, now on to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. We have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the cartoons for you. We ask ourselves, are the cartoons humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, effective or once again just plain lazy? Why don't we start off with the Daily Nation?
Or the Daily Nation. It's a caricature of William Ruto and I think RIGATHI Gachagua in yellow. Then there's a Nova with Treasury on a borrowing scale, and the scale is about to break, is on the red zone. And this thing is all going to your spending thing and
consumption and
consumption.
saving.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to this, I just want to remind country of 2 things that the president was given at the inauguration. He was given the sword.
Yes.
And given the constitution.
Correct.
They say that he paid a lot more attention to the sword than the
Yes, he
constitution. But what he did not know by receiving the constitution is that this constitution is an invoice.
Yes.
When they were in UDA and Tangatanga before election, they were accusing Uhuru Kenyatta of over-borrowing. But what they did not know is that Uhuru was borrowing not because he was a maniac. He was borrowing to stimulate spending locally. And that is what the Mongoloid economic experts are not telling.
They're not telling him that.
He's having to learn it on job.
Yes.
So I love this cartoon because it's showing Ruto the way to go
Yes.
around this economic issue and spending.
Yes, it's like they're having a dilemma. But say budget cuts, hustlers are impatient. I do honestly think that having budget cuts and subsidies is probably not the priority right now. I think the priority should have been keeping the money spending within the economy. Because if you don't, the government is largely the largest purchaser of goods and services in this economy. If you cut the expenditure, then it means there's a certain hole that will not be filled sometime in the financial year.
But does cutting expenditure does cutting expenditure also mean in some way loss of jobs?
Absolutely, it really does, especially in the context we're in right now. If you're heading into a global recession, high prices, high fuel prices, it means you cannot operate, and if you cannot operate, you have to lay off people. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Very basic economics. Now on to the Standard. I'll be very quick with this one because it's something that I really want to dismiss. Now in the panel on the left, we have a student carrying a load of books and diplomas, and on the book says 844. On the panel on the right, we have another student carrying bricks that say CBC. Now it's very clear, like this is supposed to like juxtapose, or rather show the difference, highlight the difference between 844 and CBC, especially because earlier on this month, President Ruto established a task force to evaluate CBC. Now the reason why I want to throw this particular cartoon away is because it fails to speak to the moment. The report for this task force is not due in for another 5 months? It's too early. It's too early right now.
I could not agree with you more.
So I guess
they're asking us a question of between 1 kg of cotton wool and 1 kg of rocks. which one is heavy? They'll sort it out. They'll tell us.
All right. In the Star.
In the Star, you have a caricature there of President William Ruto, and he's he's on his desk, and on his desk is debt, devolved funding, and cost of living as the problems that are facing him, and he's got to he's reaching out to his drawer, and his drawer is political debt. I don't know whether he wants to remove it or he's keeping it there. And the far side is a caricature of Deputy President RIGATHI opening up empty vaults. And the caption there is a rough first month. First, I would like to correct ozone here. And one country of falling into this danger of sweeping statements. There is nothing like the coffers were empty. That's a rubbish statement. And that statement has been corrected by none other than the central bank governor and by the CS Treasury, and says there's no way government, if you see a balance of 93 million shillings, it doesn't mean that that's all government Treasury has. And he says it well, government is like a clearinghouse, Treasury is like a clearinghouse. Money comes in and it's allocated to the different needs. The second thing I also want to say is this country was left in good, I think, economic health. We left a 13 trillion shilling economy, and we were the sixth wealthiest nation, and we still are. And let me take you back to history. When Jomo Kenyatta took power from the colonizers, the GDP was $900 million. $900 million. By the time Arab Moi was taking over power, GDP was $5 billion. Moi leaves power, Kibaki takes over power, the GDP is $13 billion. Kibaki leaves office. He leaves office in 2012, 2013, I believe. GDP was $55 billion. Kibaki leaves power a month ago. GDP is $111 billion, 13 trillion shillings, sixth wealthiest nation in Africa. If this were the case, these are facts, and I think we should rely more on facts than political rhetoric. If we have a GDP of 13 trillion shillings, the only country within the first six wealthiest nation that did not go through a recession during COVID, I think this country's economy is in good health. Cape Town, South Africa, they are having 7-hour power cuts every single day. Lebanon is having 2 hours of power every day. The economic analysts in China are having GDP growth. They're cutting it by half, GDP growth. There is high inflation rates in the whole of Europe because of the Russian-Ukraine war. And none other than the president himself, William Ruto, has told us the only reason we are going through this economic slowdown is not because of us, it's because of the Ukrainian-Russian war. So why doesn't everybody follow that cue? And we keep it moving. But this thing of telling us there's no money in the coffers, we found a depleted economy, that is not true.
Yeah.
I guess they really wanted to be in government, but never took their time to understand succession.
Absolutely.
Never
In any
took it.
case, we are in a much better place than many of our countries, many of our regional neighbors, many of our global partners. We're in a much better position.
Much better
So
place.
I think we should just get on with the work the people of Kenya have given us, have given the authority, and I think we should leave these sweeping statements to the political dustbin they belong to.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, do we have any winning cartoons? I'm sensing the Daily Nation and the Star.
I think we can keep both,
I'll keep
Alright.
both.
Daily Nation and the Star.
Those are
Consistently,
our winning cartoons. Now, on a day where we've had no winning headline and 2 winning cartoons, please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We are also on your TV screens. You can find us on Pan Free to Air, GoTV, and Star Times. Please take care of yourselves and have a lovely evening.
God bless.